Well, hi, everyone. My name, of course, is Robert Waggoner. I've been a lucid dreamer for a long time. If you can imagine, I consciously induced my first lucid dream in 1975, and since then have had more than 1,000 lucid dreams. And what I'm going to be talking about today is this process of going deeper into lucid dreaming and seeing the process behind it, the system behind it. So what we're studying today is lucid dreaming. Is it liberation or an endless maze? So as many of us know, lucid dreaming has a long tradition in Buddhist dream yoga for the last 2,000 years or so as one of the 6 paths to enlightenment. At least that's what Naropa, the Buddhist Indian yogi, said that Malang, the Buddhist dream yoga path, was one of the 6 paths to enlightenment or liberation. But what comes about, though, is how do we really come to understand that? How could a person get into that? Of course, you could read Buddhist philosophy and come to an understanding of it. But what I want to talk about is just how a person might come to understand it just as they go deeper and deeper along the lucid dreaming path. So when I began lucid dreaming, this was 5 or 6 years before the scientific evidence came out. And so imagine that you're a new person. You've just learned how to lucid dream, how to consciously induce lucid dreams. And as you do so Richard, you're going to have to mute everybody. So as you go deeper into lucid dreaming, you begin to wonder, what's going on here? How does this really work? And what's the Sorry. So you begin to wonder, what's the process here? What's really going on? So that was one thing I think that helped me. Back when I first got started in lucid dreaming, I had very little guidance. In fact, probably the only book that I had even heard about the idea was the fourth book by Carlos Castaneda, Journey to Ixtlan. And in that book, his shamanic teacher suggests that he become consciously aware in the dream state by finding his hands. And there really wasn't a technique, but I just invented my own technique by thinking about how you could go about that process. And basically, I looked at the palm of my hands before I'd go to sleep, using the power of suggestion. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And that's how I became lucidly aware. And so here you can see the book, Journey to Ixtlan by Carlos Castaneda. His shamanic teacher, Don Juan, tells him to find his hands in the dream and become aware of dreaming. And I would just create a technique, looking at the palm of my hands, telling myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. I do it for 5 minutes, fall asleep. On the 3rd night, I'm walking through my high school hallway and boom, my hands pop right in front of my face, and I realize, oh, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this. But still, it was so incredibly profound to realize that I'm consciously aware in this dream. And those football player guys, they're actually dream figures. And I remember I reached over and touched the wall, which looked exactly like the wall in B hallway of Hutchinson High School. And it felt cool and nubby. And I was just stunned. And so I walk out of B hallway towards the administration building, and I start looking at the brickwork on the administration building. And even the brickwork seems so detailed and incredible. But at that moment, I began to do something that Don Juan told Carlos not to do. And that was stare at things when you become consciously aware in the dream state. And so I was staring at the brickwork so intently that all of a sudden, it's like the lucid dream got shaky. It's like I realized, oh, it's going to fall apart. And so then I remembered Don Juan's suggestion to Carlos, which was, if the dream gets shaky like that, look at your hands to renew the power of dreaming. So I looked back at my hands to renew the power of dreaming. And all of a sudden, if you can imagine, I become a little dot of awareness floating in the palm prints of my hand. Suddenly, I'm seeing the palm prints as if I'm in the bottom of a 60-foot canyon, but I know I'm actually seeing my palm print. And so I became microscopic awareness looking at the palm print of my hands, and I'm floating through these canyons that are my palm prints. And then finally, boom, I return to my normal size. And then I remember that I want to go flying. I go flying, I get about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, but I get so excited, I wake up. So that was my very first consciously induced lucid dream. But again, one of the values for me was not having any teachings that I could check into at that time. There's a little bit in this Carlos Castaneda book, but there really wasn't very much. And so basically, I was blessed by just having to dive into the dream and learn how to swim. And so, imagine that, someone says, you become consciously aware in the dream state. Well, basically, that's like jumping into the swimming pool, but no one's really taught you how to swim. And so that's kind of where I was there at the very beginning. I did not know what to do once I got in there. And so it was fun. I could see how you could play around, you could make things, interact with dream figures, you could do fun stuff. There weren't any rules, you could fly. But how did this realm really function? And was there any meaning there? And does this dimension have any kind of rules? And so that was the beautiful thing for me for about 5 or 6 years until the scientific evidence emerged in 1981. I had to figure this all out on my own. There just wasn't any guidance there. And so how do you deal with that? And what do you learn as you go deeper on the lucid dreaming path? So one thing I learned first, as I tried to fly in a lucid dream, I knew I could fly because it was a dream and I'd flown in dreams before. But I remember the first time I thought, how do I fly up to the top of that tree? And I'll tell you what I did. I began to swim through the air and got higher and higher. And it was a little bit strange, it probably took me 30 seconds or whatever to fly 10 feet up there onto the tree. And when I woke in the morning, I thought, boy, that just seems so laborious. What's going on there? And so I began to realize that flying was connected to my beliefs. If I believed it was going to be difficult, then oftentimes I would use a physical mechanism like flying through the air by moving my arms to get someplace. But when I believed that lucid dreaming was easy and I could fly like Superman, then that changed things and I began to fly like Superman. And finally, it occurred to me that really what I needed to understand was gravity does not exist in the lucid dream state. And so if gravity doesn't exist in the lucid dream state, then I should be able to fly with ease. And when I got that belief as the primary belief in my mindset, then I could fly standing up, I could fly upside down, I could fly backwards and all that kind of way. And so I began to see, beliefs structure my experience. And so if I have my beliefs in the right place, then my experience will be ideal. And then I began to see, well, wait a second. Sometimes your beliefs can change in the moment. And this happened in one particular lucid dream. I became aware in a theater. I flew out of the theater to view the rest of the dream environment. And so I flew right through the wall. And I found myself in this beautiful campus area with some really modern looking buildings and some ancient buildings. And it was just really a beautiful, beautiful lucid dream. So then I decided to return to where I began. And so now I'm flying to come back into that theater. But on the other side, boy, those bricks look so solid and hard and real. And I have a moment's doubt about, oh, it's going to be difficult to get through those. And right then, just like this young woman in this image, I get stuck halfway through the wall. And then I realized how silly that was. And I extricated myself and got back into the theater. But what I want to point out here is that my expectation in that moment that it was going to be a little bit difficult, that helped to create that experience. If I had continued to believe that, oh, I flew through this the first time, it's easy, it's dream stuff. If I'd believed that as I came back the other way, I would have flown right through. But instead, I had a little bit of doubt, and the doubt got reflected into the experience. And so I began to see how my beliefs and expectations are getting reflected into my experience. And so then it became an issue of learning how to use focus as well. So you'd become lucidly aware, and in that state, you could decide, what do I want to do now? What should I do next? What should I focus on? And so if I focused on something like having lucid dream sex, I would go that way. But if I focused on something else, I would go that way. And so I began to see that, oh, part of lucid dreaming, besides belief and expecting, is focusing the mind. What's the goal here? What do I want to achieve? And so after that, I got deeper into paying attention to my focus. Where is my focus going? So as I kept diving deeper, I began to realize, oh, these are principles that work in this dream state. Then I began to see the value of intent. So here's how lucid dreamers use intent. When I open that door, I'll see a red Ferrari. And when you open that door, what do you see? A red Ferrari. So you begin to see the power of your intent to create. So belief and expectation and focus, those are kind of a certain level of mental principles, but the power of intent was a new thing. You could intend things into being. And so I began to play with intent as well, intending things to occur. So I began to see as I went further along, that, I'm really great at creating things. And in a sense, at that time, I believed I was controlling the lucid dream, because obviously it was me happening within my own mind. What more could there be to it? I just needed to understand the rules. And then I got to the point of will, of understanding the will. So oftentimes we think of the will like nothing can stop me, and you will the football team to victory or whatever. But I remember once in a lucid dream that I found myself flying very slowly. And I thought to myself, why am I flying so slowly? This is crazy. And then I decided to will myself forward as fast as possible. And as soon as I did that, it was amazing to see the dream objects begin to streak by me. I was going so fast that stationary objects now became light streaks. And so that's when I realized the power of the will to begin to change the experience. But as I kept going forward, this got to be even more powerful. But here it was, the summer of 1984. I'd been a lucid dreamer for 9 years by that time. And I began to see how lucid dreaming reflected my beliefs, my expectations, my focus, my intent, and will. And so I remember that summer of 84 because in August that year, I got married. And I had a lucid dream a couple months before I got married, where I was with my bride. And I said, look, I'm going to explain to you all the principles of lucid dreaming. And so we were on this stairway. And so I said, look, if you believe yada, yada, if you believe that we can get that handle of the stair to come down to us, that railing, and then it'll bring us to the next level. And so that railing came down, we grabbed it, went to the next level. And now I said, if you expect that'll happen. And we kept moving up this stairway higher and higher as I showed her how to use beliefs, expectation, focus, intent, and will. And finally, we get to the very top. And what was interesting there at the very top, I thought, oh, I have just now shown my wife, my bride, all the principles of lucid dreaming that I had learned at that time. But something at that moment strange happened. And that's when I looked around and I thought, well, what do I do now? And so I decided to have a sexual encounter with my bride. But as I looked around, I saw all of these people in robes looking at me. And I thought, how strange is that? What's going on there? Where did those guys come from? But it was all these Asian people looking at me. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I hadn't ever noticed that before. But strange things happened in lucid dreams. And so I just accepted that and went forward. That was the summer of '84. So next year, I was part of a Lucid Dream Explorers group that Linda Magallon had put together. And every month we had a goal to achieve in this Lucid Dream Explorers group. And that month, I think it was March of 1985, it was find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. And so I was away on a business trip in Chicago and remembered, oh yeah, I have to finish that. And so I became lucidly aware. And all of a sudden I remembered, oh yeah, I'm supposed to find out what the dream figures represent. I followed a woman into an office. Now there was a woman behind the counter, two women in the waiting area, and this older guy with a three-piece suit. And I walked up to him and I said, excuse me, what do you represent? And suddenly, which was very surprising, he stated a part, he didn't state, but a voice above him boomed out a partial response that didn't make sense. And I said, I looked up into the nothingness and said, blah, 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 what? And then it gave me the full response of what this dream figure represented, this non-visible voice. And so after that, I began to realize, well, wait a second, there's something going on here. Why didn't I hear him respond? Why did I hear this non-visible voice respond? And that's when I began to think that there's a larger awareness that you could interact with in the lucid dream state. And that's when I began to go deeper into lucid dreaming. So afterwards, I began to ignore the dream figures, ignore the dream setting, and I would just ask questions to what I considered the awareness behind the dream. And so like, here's an example. A young man, Brian Hearne, submitted this lucid dream to our magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience. That evening, he'd been watching a television show about migration. Why do animals migrate so far? And so, especially these sea turtles. And so that night, he became lucidly aware, and he began to think, why is it that sea turtles migrate so far? And all of a sudden, it's like he's looking at a globe of the world, and he sees this little turtle swim across the bay, okay? And now he starts to see these continents break apart because all the land mass was just one mass together. And now they start to break apart. And now that sea turtle that had swam 50 miles now had to swim 250 miles. And then he watches these land masses start to break apart even further. And he realizes, wait a second, something's going on here. And finally, these land masses stop to where we know the world as it is today. And he thought, well, wait a second, what just happened here? And he sees that sea turtle that initially had a 100-mile journey to the place to lay eggs, now had to go thousands of miles to its ancestral egg-laying place as the continents broke apart. And so that's when you begin to see that, wait a second, it's like you're tapping into a larger awareness, a larger understanding of the nature of things. And so that's just one example of how deeply lucid dreaming can go. But again, it's when you ignore the dream setting and you begin to ask a question of your inner awareness. And it's not so much that he reached out to a larger awareness, an inner self or something. He just, in a lucid dream state, had the question, why do sea turtles migrate so far? And all of a sudden, he began to see this experience. So I think that shows just how powerful this state of lucid dreaming can be when you realize that you're actually getting in touch with something of a larger system. And so, when we think of Earth, we think of, this planetary system, that we're involved in. It's our home. But when you start to think of the self as part of a system, then you begin to examine it in any number of ways. So you could say there's the ego part of the self. And so why do I think that the ego doesn't really exist so much in the lucid dream state? It's because I rarely find myself doing things that I do as an ego in the waking world. For example, in the waking world, I might see an attractive woman walking down the sidewalk, and suddenly I'll brush my hair back or straighten my tie or do something like that. In lucid dreams, I just never do that. So in lucid dreaming, you see that this part, that ego part of the system, really isn't quite so prominent. But you do have this kind of waking awareness. You can, if you stop and think about it, begin to think, okay, what street do I live on? Oh yeah, I live on this street. What's my phone number? If you take a moment, you can begin to recall that stuff. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, but you begin to recall it and all. But what you really find is you have kind of a conscious system, conscious self system that you're aware of. And you're aware of interacting with the dream, relating to the dream figures. When you reach out to this larger awareness, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see, then suddenly things respond. And that's when you begin to see that, oh, I'm connecting with a larger awareness here. Like, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And suddenly something incredible occurs. And that's when you begin to realize that it's part of a larger system. You begin to move from dreams as a symbol view to dreams and lucid dreaming as part of a system that engages various parts of the self. So this is when you begin to reach out to this larger awareness and see where it takes you. And that was really a powerful understanding for me, because then I began to realize that all of us focus on waking concerns, on conscious concerns, and sometimes we bring that energy with us into the lucid dream state. But if we want to go deeper, we can ask a question of this non-visible awareness at this different level of consciousness, and suddenly we'll begin to see things, just like Brian Hearne did when he asked, why do sea turtles migrate so far? And that's when you get to kind of a different view, that you're going beyond your own kind of waking conscious mind and getting in touch with something larger. something a little bit more mysterious. And so I bring up this example of the solar system in as much as at one time, people thought, once they realized the Earth was a planet, that everything rotated around the Earth because, of course, the Earth was the center of things. But when you begin to interact with this larger awareness, you begin to see that, wait, this conscious self, this waking self, is actually connected to something much larger. And what is it rotating around? And that's how powerful this begins to get when you move away from simply thinking of things as simple symbols to actually seeing that, oh, I'm part of a system here, and I can connect with my larger awareness just by ignoring whatever I see right now and moving deeper into the system. So as you begin to get into this, you realize that there's a certain value to kind of a system view of lucid dreaming. And when you realize that a larger system exists. And so first part of the value is that you realize that the self exists as more than just the ego, more than waking consciousness, and more than just this basic conscious awareness, that you can reach out to a larger awareness and get its perspective on things. So show me something important for me to see. And suddenly the entire lucid dream changed. Or, hey, dream, show me a response to this question. And suddenly a response comes. That's when you realize that, oh, there's a larger system going on here. Now, the value of it is you begin to see that things in a more holistic sense. Because when you're just dealing with your ego and waking and conscious self, oftentimes it'll reflect back to you your beliefs and expectations. But when you reach out to an awareness behind the dream, to this larger awareness, oftentimes you'll get a different kind of response, a new kind of response. And so I would say that the value first is that it's to some degree more holistic. It gives you a new response, a new way of thinking. Also, you realize that a narrow focus, and the narrow focus is the dream drama. But when you focus more broadly, you think about, oh, the symbolism of the dream drama. It's actually symbols interacting, and these symbols have meaning, and there's something more going on here. And then when you interact with the larger awareness, you begin to think, well, how does this system really work? What's going on here? What explains the system? Why did that appear? What is the goal behind all of this? And so that's what happens, I think, as we go deeper into lucid dreaming and adopt this systems view. We begin to interact with this awareness behind the dream. We see that it has greater creativity than we have, that it has seemingly a larger awareness than we have. And sometimes it has information outside of our own knowing. And that's when this systems view becomes so valuable. So as we go deeper here, we begin to see things more differently. And excuse me, but we begin to realize that we're relating to our own mental overlay of meaning. Things occur, and we kind of project a mental overlay out onto the dream experience. And so we have this aspect going on there. So, but as we begin to realize that we can ask questions within the lucid dream and this larger awareness responds, then we begin to see that we're in part of a co-creational process. In that first stage that took 10 years to get, I realized how I was creating my experience through my beliefs, expectation, my focus, intent, my will. But when I realized that there was an awareness behind the dream, then I realized, oh, this is a co-created process. My larger awareness is bringing things into the dream, and also the dream is reflecting my own beliefs, expectations, focus, intent back to me, normally my beliefs. So in this way, lucid dreams becomes kind of a educational process. We get into this kind of school system. Lucid dreaming becomes kind of a school system. And so we begin to realize that all experience, whether waking or dreaming or lucid dreaming, involves a certain kind of meaning, which is learning, which is going deeper into the experience. So what I also began to realize is that in lucid dreams, we oftentimes bring our belief limitations. We observe our mental overlay over the experience and don't realize that there's anything more going on. And so belief limitations really, our beliefs structure the lucid dream experience, but if we have limiting beliefs, then it limits the structure of our experience. So if you wanted to understand what you might call a real reality, you had to go beyond the mental overlay. And this is when you begin to do experiments. Is there a real reality? What's really going on here in the lucid dream? And so that's when you begin to play around with, can you get information outside of time and space? Is there more going on here than just my mental system and mucking about within my own mental system? And so as I began to question this and went deeper into lucid dreaming, I began to realize that the lucid dream reflected back to me myself, my beliefs, my expectations, my focus, my intent and will, along with my larger awareness. But what would happen if I began to let go of my belief, expectation, focus, intent, and will? What would happen if I let that all go? And that's when I began to let go of all of that, I would fall asleep at night and there'd be nothing but blue light. And the entire night was blue light. And so that's when I realized that the mental overlay, if you let go of the mental overlay, then you would have an experience of something beyond the mental overlay. And that was the first step, was entire nights of this blue light experience. So this went on for a while, and kept having these nights of just blue light the entire night. I remember one night I was in this bubble where these kind of two others were kind of moving me into this really strange space. And I got out of the bubble lucidly aware and was walking around this kind of temple area. And then I saw this creature composed of blue light. And I began to laugh because I thought, is this a blue light being, a being composed of blue light, or is this a blue light, kind of monster or something? Because it was 3 times taller than I was. It was about 16 feet tall. And I ran beyond it, knowing that it was a lucid dream. And right as I ran right up to it and got beyond it, then there was this incredible explosion. And I felt like every fiber in my body had been changed or something like that. And I woke up and I thought, what was that about? But again, I think I began to see that there's a larger awareness. But one night is when something truly fantastic happened. I went to sleep, and as I was going to sleep, I heard this kind of inner awareness tell me that if you want to go the distance, you might cease to be. And I'd been having all these nights that were nothing but blue light. And I'd had this other experience of of this kind of blue light being that I ran beyond, and then the dream exploded. And I told this inner awareness, I said, look, I have to understand, otherwise I'm just some epiphenomenon in this crazy world. I allow myself to cease to be, because I began to realize that my larger awareness had even a greater knowing than my awareness. And if you can imagine, that night it began, imagine awareness aware within awareness. So imagine the light of awareness aware within the light of awareness, and no self, no object. That's the experience that happened to me. And I remember finally that experience stopped, and I found myself standing next to a guy, and I asked him, what was that? Was that a lucid dream? And he said, oh no, to enter a lucid dream, go here. And I step into that space, go down this tunnel of light, realize that I have to go up to go into a lucid dream, begin to feel this incredible energy around the crown of my head, and I come in through the floor, lucidly aware, into a lucid dream. So what you see here, I feel, is that lucid dreaming shows us that there's an awareness behind the dream, that it's not visible, that it's normally non-visible, and the dream, as well as the lucid dream, is a co-created product. It exists by virtue of this interaction between the self, the waking self, and its larger awareness. And so it's a co-created process. And if you take it further, though, you can connect with what I would call the oneness, this interconnected oneness, where you let go of self, where you let go of belief, expectation, focus, intent, all of that ideation, you let go of it. And then what happens then within the lucid dream, normally you'll get closer and closer to this experience of oneness, or what you might call the interconnected oneness. But it's truly powerful how deep lucid dreaming can go, and what it can show you as you dive into it deeper. So this kind of connects to a Buddhist teaching by a long ago teacher, Waggoner, who had his fivefold teachings. And his first suggestion is vision experience is mind. Then his next one is mind is emptiness. Emptiness is clear light. Clear light is union. Union is great bliss. But what I began to see by virtue of this process is this is very a succinct way of explaining what's going on there. That in the lucid dream, our experience, or our whatever, is composed of mental thoughts, our beliefs, our expectations, our focus, our intent, along with our larger awareness. But when you go beyond that, then it's an emptiness. When you realize that all of that's the construct, all of that's just the thoughts that are going through the mind, and the mind creates the lucid dream experience as well as the dream experience. And then when you begin to see that the mind helps create waking world experience, then you realize that, oh, fundamentally, the mind is emptiness. And when you get to that spot, that's when I think you can get to this issue of when you let go of self, when you cease to be, that's when you can have an experience of the clear light. So that's my little bit rambling way of kind of explaining, this process of lucid dreaming goes deeper and deeper. You see how beliefs, expectation, focus, intent, will get reflected in the lucid dream. Then you realize how you can interact with this awareness behind the dream, this larger awareness. And then you realize that if you want to go the furthest distance, you have to basically let go of all of that. And that's when these kind of experiences happen. But anyway, I'll stop right now, come to the end here. So I guess I have one more slide I'm kind of giving a systems view of lucid dreaming. So a Taoist might follow, and manipulate energy. A Sufi person might follow the divine inward and connect. In a Carlos Castaneda kind of view, it's kind of restructuring your worldview to kind of go deeper like this. But when you do use these various systems within the lucid dreaming experience, you can take your experience to just truly profound places.